Welcome back to the Between Breasts podcast. I'm in buoyant mood again. Now, there's a little special intro for today's guest because normally I record the intro after having done the interview. But this time I haven't even done it because I wanted to capture my excitement. I'm speaking to the guy who won the Dragon's Back race in September 2020, so last year's Dragon's Back race, like last year. That was the same time I did the Ring of Fire. Now, James Nobles is his name, and I can't wait to speak to him because anyone that knows anything about ultra running, etc., and some of my own story about getting into it, I watched the Dragon's Back documentary on the BBC on iPlayer. It's on YouTube as well. It's mega, and I watched that, and I'm stupid, but I'm not that stupid. So I didn't sign up to that. It's like I think it's 5 days or 6 days running across from the top of Wales to the bottom of Wales through over the highest mountains across the whole of the spine of Wales. It's ridiculous. As you're not allowed any support or anything. It's like crazy. But you have like you stay overnight in tents between each stage and everything. But we'll hear from James on that. But it inspired me to sign up for my first multi-day ultra marathon, which was the Ring of Fire, which was ironically like half of what James had to do. So I cannot wait to hear from him how it went down, how he actually managed to win it at his first attempt, and all the stories that I know will be there. And I wanted to do this intro before having actually, rather than doing it in retrospect like we normally would do. So yeah, cannot wait. It's about to go down. I hope you enjoy it. It's one of those that I know I'm going to be like, after speaking to him, I'm going to be like, oh no, I really want to do it now myself. But no, we'll see. But I don't want that to be, anyway, I'm bumbling, you know what I mean? But of just the anticipation of it's making me laugh as to what it be, because there's some very big differences. I've read already a blog from him that said that he volunteered as a marshal the year before, I believe, to get a gauge of like what the event is like and stuff. And I'm thinking, God, that is proper preparation, isn't it? Rather than me, who like underprepared totally for all of my things. So there's going to be some stark differences between the two of us, and I'm going to definitely learn something. Oh, and that's what I was going to say, that the this interview has come a part of. I was with a friend of mine, Sam Raven, or aka Ravo, he's played rugby with at Nottingham for many years, and I was down visiting him a few months ago, and we were talking about what he was up to these days. I've not seen him in ages, and I said about the ultra running, and I said about something other, and he was like, "Ah, oh, my mate won this like one in Wales," and I was like, "Hold on a minute, what? Like the Dragon's Back?" He was, "Yeah, something about a dragon. Yeah, Dragon's Back." He was like, "Yeah, that's it." I was like, "What's his name?" He was like, "James." I was like, "Hold on a minute, that's the guy so you're mates with the guy that won it last year?" And he was like, "Yeah, he lives down the road." And I was like, "Right, you got to hook us up because I want to interview that guy because I'm interested to see what went on." So it's all come through. The world is a very small place and everyone's beautifully connected, aren't they? So big thank you to Ravo, Sam Raven, for connecting me with James. And here we are. This is going to be James Nobles on the Between Breaths podcast. We enter this world taking our first breath, and sadly, we leave this place taking our last. And what I want to do with this podcast is to explore what happens between those breaths. I'm David Jackson, Jacko, and this is the Between Breaths podcast. Okay, James, welcome to the Between Breaths podcast. I was like, right, we need to just get into this. I don't want too much chatting off air. The excitement has already started. I've said a couple of things. Just welcome to the Between Breaths podcast.
Thank you. Really nice to be able to have a chat with you about it.
Yeah. Well, about the Dragon's Back, and potentially we're going to see where this
a few other bits and pieces as well.
See where this thing goes, because anyone that has won an ultra marathon event like the Dragon's Back is going to have a few stories. There's going to be some stories potentially before it. There's going to be some stories through it, and then there's potentially what's going on after it. And I'm just massively intrigued for a number of different reasons, which we'll get into. Very luckily, the world of rugby connected. So we have a mutual friend. So shout out to Ravo for being able to connect us. But for those people that are listening, normally I would say, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself. But actually, the first thing I want to do, not that, the most important thing here is you and who you are, but I've made a bit of a big thing about the Dragon's Back. It's what inspired me to take on a multi-day event. I wasn't stupid enough for that to be my first one, because it's sort of, people say it's the hardest mountain race, or one of the hardest mountain races in the world, certainly in the UK. So just to say hello to everyone, and just, what is the Dragon's Back? What is that race? Just outline it a little bit for us.
The Dragon's Back, so it started, I think, like 20 or 30 years ago, and it was like one of the tests that I think the special forces used to do, where they went and they followed like a certain route from like the very northern, or one of the most northern points in Wales, through to they used to finish at the end of the Brecon Beacons. But the Dragon's Back, as it currently is now, is about, I think it's about 240 miles that gets split across 6 days. So roughly you're doing 40, 45 miles a day. I think one of the days is, in fact, the first day is a little bit shorter. It's about 33 miles. But you start at Conwy Castle in the north of Wales, and you have this amazing like departure with this big the choir kind of singing you out of the castle. Okay. And then you head out of there, which we'll probably get into a bit more of the specifics, but you then kind of follow like the mountain ridges all down through Wales, and you finish then 6 days later down in Cardiff Castle. And each night you've got like a kind of a campsite, and once you've finished the day's running, that's it, the clock stops, and then you kind of got to get yourself together, get your admin done, and then you depart again the next morning at sort of a specific time. But yeah, it's 240-ish miles, and I think it's about 56,000 feet of climbing throughout the week, with one or 2 days that are slightly flatter, and well, they say they're a bit easier, but I prefer the hillier days to the flatter days.
Yeah.
So right. That's a snapshot of it, I think.
Yes, and that's just to context for people, that there'll be a mixture of people listening to this, some that are potentially into running, some that are more into like breath training and can't even possibly imagine, someone that's never done even like a 10K before, going like, hold on a minute, did he just say 40 odd miles each day for 6 days? Like, yes, that is what he said. I am in like state, because I say I'd done we just said before we went live, like, and people will know about the three. I did a 3-day event, so half the days it was 135 miles, so it's like half the distance. I think we did 4,000 meters of elevation around Anglesey, so it was like half the elevation. So it's basically just, you literally doubled everything that we did, and it was I was totally unprepared for it, and was like, it was horrendous. You're basically doing close to like 2 marathons a day for 6 days, and the elevation is going to be big time. I laughed when you said you get back and you do your admin, because one of the things that's different as well to the Dragon's Back is when you're doing the event, you're not allowed any support. And I remember reading in like the rules of it, it was like, your mate can't even go, hey, I've left you a drink over on the wall there, grab it as you walk by. Like, you're not allowed anything.
No, nothing.
How much harder
unless you are able to give it to every single person. Yes. So if you were to provide, for example, someone might come out into the street and they might have like a box of sweets, and if they can offer that out to everybody, then that's okay. But if you have like a mate who's just kind of following you down the road and giving you things, then yeah, that's not allowed.
Right, so you're not allowed your wife to carry you for about 3/4 of it.
Psychologically, maybe they're able to, but yeah, not physically able to help you with that.
But then in between those days, campsite is set up for you. You don't have to do because just give us a bit of an idea of what is it like on those days in between before we get into the detail of like the run and stuff and what goes through your head and everything? And when you said admin, are you talking about emails or are you talking about putting lubrication on your arsehole and stuff like
Yes,
that?
so
What type of
sorting
admin
stuff
are we
out,
talking?
checking out the battle wounds of the day. It depends. So this will vary massively depending on like what time you get in. So with us kind of being towards the front of the pack, like we were a lot luckier because we'd be back in by I
Hmm.
don't know 4 o'clock ish, maybe 3 4 o'clock each day.
Right.
Um, and that then gave us the best part, I'd say, of at least like 6 hours to try and get yourself in, like, get yourself sorted out. So usually I'd get in, and one of the first things I'd do would just be to try and like get a bit of food.
Yeah.
And like you said, like it's not just like tents there. They've got like a full catering tent setup. They've got a full like power charging station. They had a drying facility. So they've got loads and loads of facilities. So anyway, you'd kind of get in. I'd probably get like say a plate of chips and probably some soup, and then it'd be a case of trying to like go in and having a look at like what the state of your feet are. I'd always do like loads of stretching at the end of each day, again just to
Yeah.
whilst you've just finished probably like a really hard day, like all that was in at least the back of my mind is what do I now need to do in order to get myself ready for the next day.
Yeah.
Uh, so it's not a continuous event, but in a way, elements of it are quite
Yeah.
continuous because I could never really like switch off that much. There were always
Yeah.
kind of things going through my mind. I was like, is there anything else I could do to make sure that I'm going to be in a better shape for tomorrow?
Yeah.
So I'd get in, like I say, I'd sort my feet out. I'd usually put talcum powder on them, try dry them out as quickly as I could, put waterproof socks on so I'm like not going to get them wet again for the rest of the day. I'd always have like a really good pair of compression leggings on,
Yeah.
and I'd sleep in those no
Yeah.
matter
Yeah.
how. And yeah, that was another kind of little thing that I did. Ate loads. I even took like well, it wasn't a full scale foam roller, but it was like one of those
Yeah.
rolling pin style foam
Okay. Yeah.
rollers. I had one of those in the back of my bag, and that again, I was just using that every day. Go
Yeah.
down to the river, have a soak in there, try and get a little bit of the inflammation down, like in my
Yeah.
legs. So it was just constant, like trying to
Yeah.
recover. And
Okay.
then the end of it all, you've got to, and I've listened to quite a few podcasts of people who haven't necessarily done the Dragon's Back, and they're thinking about like the sleep element of the Dragon's Back. And you've got people saying, and I can fall asleep, like I'm notoriously good at falling asleep,
Yeah.
like anywhere, anytime. But the difference with the Dragon's Back is I don't think it matters how much of a good sleeper you are. Like you've just run 40 odd miles in the day,
Yeah.
your body is like kind of, or your legs will probably be like screaming at you.
Yeah, and
And so it's,
you're in a state of fight or flight. This is what I found. I've fallen asleep on the side of a mountain before when I
yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
stressed.
yeah.
But when your system is run a couple of marathons, our second day was like the longest. We did 112 kilometers or something. It was like they made the middle day like really long.
Yeah,
It's horrendous. And
yeah,
like
I
there
bet.
was an 18-hour cutoff, and I came in like 15 minutes before the end. I
Yeah,
was the opposite to you. I was at the back, not getting much rest, and I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep. You lie down for 3 hours, four
yeah,
hours. That was the most I
yeah,
sort of got, but and fell asleep for maybe like 20 minutes. So you don't, like, it feels like your system can't shut off.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you've just got jitters.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think maybe across like I had the time to be able to sleep. Like
Sleep. Yeah.
I had my head down in the sleeping bag probably at 10 o'clock ish, and because again we were coming in like sort of early doors, we then had mandated start times the next day, so we
Yeah.
had to
When did
wait
you
at
start?
least. So we had to start, I think, between 8 and 8:30 in the morning, and
Oh, okay. It's not bad.
most people like the gates kind of open if you like at 6 a.m. in the morning. So we had to wait a little bit longer. So we had a big window of time
Nice.
there to try and
Yeah.
get sleep, but
Yeah.
it's just constant like tossing and turning, trying to get like comfortable, trying to like not go out to the toilet too many times. It's
Yeah.
it's so it's so many little things, but ultimately you're just trying to do what you can to like get as much rest as possible.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've heard again people talking about maybe taking like night nurse with them to try and help them sleep this year. So I hadn't heard of that like when I did it last year. So I'd be really intrigued to see how the people who potentially take night nurse,
Yeah.
how they get on and whether or not they do get any sleep.
Yeah. let's just then dial back slightly. I've got a couple of questions around like one, was the plan to win? Like, did you go there to win? Two, preparation, like because this all partly tells the story of like who you are and you as a runner and your experience into this. So we'll go back now to find out a bit more about yourself. Because I remember reading in a blog you'd done afterwards saying that the year before you'd volunteered to get to be one of the marshals or whatever, so you got a good idea of what the event is like and stuff. And I was like, wow, I didn't even know what the cut-off times were 2 weeks before I was about to start my event. Oh yeah, just on that, what was so you were up the front of the pack and obviously went on to win. You were starting at 8ish in the morning and finish about 4 o'clock in the
Yeah,
evening. What? Because I found the most stressful thing was the cut-off times. I just didn't want to get timed out.
yeah.
What was the cut-off? What were the cut-off times like? And what was the latest someone was coming in at?
Um, so the cutoff times at the beginning, like I think, were really so they in historically they would always set off at 7 a.m. from Conway Castle,
Yeah,
and people were really struggling, I think, to get to. There's two main checkpoints on the first day, and
yeah,
there were quite a big number of people struggling to hit those cutoff points. So they moved it then an hour earlier to start at 6 a.m.
okay,
just to give people an extra
yeah,
hour or so to get through. I think in the first few days, like the cutoff times, like they're achievable, but you've got to be moving at a reasonable pace
mm,
in order to be able to kind of get to them. So I think it's, I don't know, a brisk walk. People by this point in time will have probably done as much wrecking as they're going to be able to do. So I think at this point you'll be feeling quite comfortable and confident going into it that you're going to be able to hit some of the cutoff times. But they are fairly tricky earlier on in the race, and then I think once you've kind of got maybe to day 5, day 6, if you've been hitting the cutoff points up until
yeah.
that point, you're
You sort
probably
of,
going to be okay. They're not going to get
yeah,
any harder there on out. So the
yeah.
attrition rate, the year I volunteered, the attrition rate was massive. It was like 75% of people didn't finish the race.
Wow.
I think the year that I competed in it, the weather was a bit more kind.
It was
Um,
hot though, wasn't it? Like it was. You started the day after. It was hot that we did the. Well, and then
but,
it also pissed
but
it down.
compared to the year before, they had like 2 days of 30 plus degrees.
Yeah.
So we had, I think it was warmish, but it wasn't too bad.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, our year, I'd say I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's probably somewhere in the region of like 50 to 60% didn't finish.
Yeah.
However, I think if you made it to maybe day 3, the chances are that you're going to be the odds are in your favour to get to the end unless disaster strikes.
Yeah.
So yeah, the cutoffs are yeah, they can be. I think they're okay. They're manageable. They're manageable.
What was the back of the pack? What were people coming in at if you were coming in at 4 p.m.?
So the course closed at 10 o'clock.
Yeah. So that's
Um,
that was
it's a
where we
long
were.
day
That's
out.
where we were at. It was like coming in at 10 compared to coming in at 4, 5, even
Yeah,
6 or 7. It was,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. You get
And then
rewarded for being better. You get rewarded for going faster.
what you do in terms of recovery, yeah, it's
Yeah.
I don't know. We were out on the course in total. I think it was like 45 hours,
Yeah.
and then you just look at how long other people genuinely had to like soldier on for, and I'm like, I don't know how they do that. I
Yeah.
really, really don't.
Yeah.
Because yeah, you imagine, well, you've done it, been out from like sort of 6 a.m. in the morning through till 10 o'clock at night. They're like such long days to just keep moving, and then you got to sort everything out when you get to the other end.
Yeah.
Try and get a bit of sleep, get some food, do all that, and then go again the next day. It's yeah, I think we had it easier on the yeah on many fronts.
But you've earned it to be able to come. You've earned it to be able to be running at a pace or moving at a pace that gets you in earlier. So a question, and we'll come. Well, let's come to then. Like, was the plan to win? What was your preparation like in your previous experience to this? But just very quickly before that, like to give people a bit of a gauge, when you're running up, like on day one, you go up Crib Gore, like you go up
Yeah,
Snowdon, like that's over 1,000 meters. Like with all the climbing and everything you're doing, if you were saying how much of it are you running, jogging as a percentage compared to like just having to walk because either it's that steep or you're that hooked that you've basically having to walk for a bit.
Uh, you're not you're not running really up any of the hills.
Yeah.
You're power walking almost. I wouldn't say I I don't know. I don't know what percentage incline, but anything big, like as soon as you see Trivan in front of you, you know you're not going to be running up that.
Yeah.
But then once you've got up onto the top of there and there's the glitters in front of it, you can kind of you're trying to run, or at least we were trying to run on anything that was flat, maybe a slight incline. Sorry, let me just let the dog out.
Yeah.
Maybe a slight incline. You're definitely jogging down the hills, or I was trying to jog down the hills. Um, yeah, so it's for the most part, and again, to hit those sort of cutoffs, you really don't need to be running masses and masses and masses of it. Because, like you say, I'd like to see people who are taking part in, I don't know, a 40 plus mile race, run up something like Trivan and then run up.
No, yeah.
I just don't. Your energy systems, I could just get hammered if you're doing that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so essentially, any opportunity you had, was there ever a point for you though? And maybe it's an obvious answer because you won it. Was there any point for you where, like, terrain wise or elevation wise, it's fine to run, but it's like day 4 or 5 or whenever, and you're like, I just can't run, or were you that well?
No, no, no. Like I remember it was on the second day, I think it was, like as we were just about to go into the Rinogs. And you go up, I think I hope I'm remembering this right, up like the Roman steps, I think it's called.
Yeah.
And it's like it's a reasonable kind of gradient, so it's a runnable gradient. And I was like, you know, at the bottom, I thought, right, I'm feeling good. There was myself and another one of the guys who were leading it. We were both running together at that point, and I was like, I'm going to keep going. I'm just going to see. I'm just going to try run up this as much as I can. And then I did. I ran quite a long way, and I think I made a little gap on the chap who was behind me at the time. But then, as soon as we turned right and headed up actually into the Rinogs, all of a sudden I was like, "Oh my god, I can't move anymore." So I did. I had to. Well, he overtook me again, and I was sat down that was the only time in the race where I sat down. I was like, I need to kind of gather my
Wow.
thoughts,
Yeah.
get some more food in. I was on the verge of like bonking.
Right.
That is not a good place to be when you're trying to kind of keep pressing. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
it
good on
definitely
you.
happened.
If
It happened.
that was happening on day 2, and you got another 4 days
Yeah,
to go.
but you learn your lessons, I think, quite quick.
Yeah.
I was right from the outset. I was very eager not to like get drawn into like sort of high speed, like anything like kind of high pace. Like I knew in order to be able to kind of do as well as I could, I had to kind of really manage the pace. And so I wasn't going to start just racing people almost needlessly within the day just for the sake of, I don't know, bit of bravado.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be as consistent as possible the whole way through, and in the end, it paid off.
Well, yeah. Let's understand a little bit more about you and your experience and preparation and expectations. Um, were you going there to try to win? Did you think like, or were you going there like? I think I think one of the things I love about the ultra events is, okay, there's some people at the front that are, it's competitive, but a lot of the events are a case of there's a mass of people, and we're all looking at each other beforehand going like, fucking hope we make it to the end, like, and it's like, it's not, and everyone's very encouraging of each other, and it's very much like that. But that's been my experience,
Yeah,
being someone
yeah.
that's very much at the back of the pack. Were you taking part, or did you go there with I think I can win this thing? It was the first time you'd done it, right?
Yeah, first time I'd done it. First time I'd um, done anything of that kind of. I hadn't done a multi-day race before, so I was kind of really stepping into the
No,
unknown.
you'd never
Um,
done a multi-day before.
Never done. I'd done them in preparation. If we kind of chat about that,
Okay, yeah,
I did the first 3 days back to back in preparation,
on your
um,
own.
with two friends. Yeah.
Nice. And what,
So
camped in between? How did you
we went a bit more. No,
upmarket?
we were
You went
slightly more
Airbnb.
in a YHA.
Okay, quality.
So yeah, we were. but we did the first 3 days, and that was really good prep. But no,
Right. Okay.
I hadn't done a multi-day race before that. I
Well,
was still
can I just sort of say, there's one thing I said after I guess not failed. I didn't fail because I guess, ended up doing it. But it definitely felt like a failure in like how bad I was at getting to the end. But one thing I said, I haven't really got any sort of necessarily data to prove it. But one thing I said was like, I feel like you need to be able to have done half of what you're going to do to some degree in terms of distance, in terms of elevation, in terms of time, in terms of that. And that proves that nicely to me, because my rational sort of thought on it is, if you have done half of something, at least your nervous system, your body, your mind has got an idea, a ballpark of like, okay, it's like this, but double, but it's like this. And if you can get to halfway, you haven't got to do anything you haven't done before. You've just got to do the same thing again.
yeah,
And I was nowhere near that, but that
yeah.
was my mistake.
But I can kind of completely see the logic in it, and I I mean, with the Dragons back, I just wanted to kind of get a feel for. Wasn't necessarily I was aiming for like doing half of the event or anything like that. It was more I was just trying to get my body used to doing like the multi-day nature of
Yeah.
it, because I think like when you and like you'll have experienced this, like it doesn't matter if it's a 6 day event or a 3 day event. I think the way in which you go about approaching those will probably be quite um, similar in that like I knew I was out for 6 days, just the same as which you knew you were going to be out for 3 days. So if I was only out for 3 days, I might have tried to go, for example, like a little bit harder on some of the days. But because so it's not a case of like the doing it for 6 days is twice as difficult as doing a 3 day event. It's just longer, and you've just got to like spread
Yeah.
your energy and everything else out over a longer period of time. I know, so I'm doing the spine in January.
Oh, cool.
I'm not going to go out and try do like 136 miles like in preparation for it, but um, just because again it takes so much to recover from these sorts of things. But I try to get into a mindset where I feel like it helps when you've I think done things beforehand. So I've
Yeah.
done like the three big rounds in England, Wales, and Scotland. So the Bob Graham, the Charlie Ramsey, and the Paddy Buckley round. So they're all about
Okay.
sort of 60 to 70 miles each.
Yeah.
So, but when I started at the very, very beginning, like I was always I was each week trying to increase like the mileage of like my long runs. So I'd be going 30 miles, 35 miles, 40 miles, because I was really aware that I'd never gone anything beyond that.
Yeah.
But then once I've kind of done the first one, which was the Bob Graham, I was like, well, I don't need to keep doing these 40-mile runs now. I know my body can cope with it
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you're just going a bit slower.
Yeah.
And so then you just kind of build this, I don't know, build some experience, I guess, that you can rely on your body. It's actually a lot stronger than probably what you ever think it's going to be, and it can do like a lot more. So yes, I'm hopefully not going to go into the spine having done too many like really really long runs.
Yeah.
Um, it'll just be
Yeah.
a case of getting myself as fit as possible and as strong as possible, and yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I
But
think when you've got the history of what you've done, as in like the within the body, within the nervous system, literally within your tissues, it's done that. It's done
yeah,
6 days. It's done over 200 and whatever miles it was.
yeah,
Um, but can you remember? Well, my reaction was when you said it was the first multi-day event you'd done. I was like, God, that is such a like a big jump. But you've done some, like say Bob Graham or those types of runs where it's not multi-day, but it's a long distance. So your body knows what it's like to run 60 miles or whatever, and
yeah.
it's hard. It knows how to like and what it's going to feel like in terms of horrendous. Um, can you remember the first time that you then like backed it up on a second day? Because that was the thing that blew my mind. It's the thing that got me. I finished my first marathon. Must have been October 2021.
Yeah.
Did an off-road like trail marathon in Norfolk. It went as flat as I could, but off-road. And the next day, I was an absolute mess. And I was like, how do people run like run another marathon the next day? I was like, I can't walk to the shop.
Yeah.
And it blew, and that's actually what, for whatever reason, rather than the opposite of like not doing it, I was like, I wanted to see whether I could do it. So I signed up to a multi-day. And the first time I'd tried to run again after we did an event down in Exmoor. It was like 30 miles on day one and 10 on day two. So then that was it. So it was like relatively speaking, I'd never done anything like that before, but that was
Yeah.
ironically, that was the furthest preparation I'd done. And when I finished those 30 miles, it was horrible. It was bad. It took a long time. Anyway, I was like, I remember talking to a lady, she'd done loads of ultras like all over the world and stuff. And I was like, how am I going to run tomorrow? I was like, I can't move. How am I going to? She was like, you will. You'll loosen up. And I remember thinking like, getting up and being like, oh my days. Can you remember that feel like, and when was that?
It was every day. What you mean on the Dragon's Back, or
Yeah, or even so on the Dragon's Back, or like, was there a time in your prep training where you were like, right, I've done a big day
yeah,
and I'm going to back it up with another big day, and it's the first time I've ever backed it up the next day with another
yeah,
big
yeah.
day. Like, can you remember what that was?
So in my training for the Dragon's Back, I think it was maybe every month, every 6 weeks, I'd always put in like a really or a reasonably big like back to back weekend. So I'd do a hard run on a Friday night, and maybe it'd be like quite a quick one. So my legs like were quite drained. Then on the Saturday morning, I'd get up like early doors, get out, do 20, 25 miles, and then I do the same again on the Sunday.
Yeah.
And it is hard. Like it's
And how sore are you on Monday morning after like when you're in preparation, when you're training? You're getting, you haven't, you're like that's like you've built. It sounds like you've been very progressive and very sensible with your training. You've built up to that, but there's always the first time. Like when you're on the aeroplane and
yeah,
you're
yeah,
landing from holiday, and the pilot goes, "Oh, I'm just," and like he doesn't say to you, "Oh, this is the first time I've actually done this outside the simulator," or
yeah,
she.
yeah,
But there is a time when you do it for the first time. There's a time if people on a plane, it might be the pilot's first ever time doing it outside the simulator. But anyway, what was this? What was your, or had you worked up very progressively so your body
yeah.
was in such a state of shock?
There isn't like a point in my mind where I can remember anything that vivid. And
Okay.
I never felt like I'd been hit by a train, and because I'd progressively like built it
Yeah.
up, and I knew that those weekends of the back to back runs would be fairly tricky to do. And so maybe, but then on the Monday, like I had like I don't know, 6 month training plan, if you like, that was laid out. So you can kind of see like, well, I could see what's coming.
Yeah.
So it was just a case of like, I think this is my mindset slash mentality is just like I've got a training plan, for example, for the spine, and it's just a case of like ticking off the sessions. So
Yeah.
as soon as one's done, it's like, okay, good, and then it's just do it again like the next day, and
Yeah.
it's just this constant like, yeah, it just never stops. It's just slowly just getting building up, getting hopefully fitter and fitter and stronger if you can stave off the injuries. Um, and yeah, it's just, and I don't, at least in my training, I don't really ever try to get to the point where I'm absolutely done in, because then you've got to then recover from that, and then you've got to train again the next week. So I'm
Yeah.
presuming it's like the same as rugby. Like you can't just keep hammering your body all the time. Like you need to get your body used to things as best you can, and then
Yeah.
keep building up, building up, building it up. And then after things like the Dragon's Back, and I did the Northern Traverse a few months ago, like that, I was wrecked then. Like I was really like, it took months to get the energy back and to get like
Right.
kind of running properly again. So they take so much out of you. So
Yeah.
the training was about slowly like building up to these things, hoping then that you've done enough to be fit enough to do them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So
but yeah,
what point did you start to think that you might actually win it? And then did that affect your mentality? Because if you were, or, you haven't necessarily, I'll ask it very directly now then, like, were you going there with an eye on like, I want to win it?
I was going there thinking I've done all I can to win. Yeah.
But you thought
Um,
you were in a position. Okay, cool.
I thought I was in a position to be able to do it, but given that I'd never done anything like that before,
Yeah.
I didn't have anything to kind of. I had no idea, for example, where I was going to fare in the field of other runners that were there.
Yeah.
I'd never run against any of these other people before, so I knew I'd done loads of training. I knew I was fit. I definitely went out trying to sort of stick at the front of the pack. So I knew the guy who won it the year before,
Yeah.
Simon Roberts, he was
Yes.
there again the year I
Okay.
did it. So I did. I knew I was like I'm going to stick with him,
Yeah.
and if I feel like I'm kind of able to hold that pace, then that's a really good sign.
Yeah.
And then I'll just see what happens thereafter for
Yeah.
the rest of the race.
And
Um,
at what stage then was it looking like, hold on a minute, I might actually have this, and did that affect mentality? Because the mental side of it, when you're running for 6 days in a row, pretty much all day, like it's a mental game, right?
yeah, a massive, massive mental game. I was trying. There were three of us that were sort of like kind of. Well, we didn't rotate as such that much, but so Chris Cope, he he'd come from like a Ironman sort of background beforehand,
Okay.
and he went out on the first 2 days, and like he was like the difference in level, if you like, or at least the difference in speed was astonishing. Like Chris just stormed the field like those first 2 days. Like he finished a half an hour in front of us on the first day, and that's like quite a lot in the grand
Yeah.
scheme of things. So half an hour in front of the first day. Second day, I think he might have like put an hour on us, but then I think because he'd gone that hard, he then struggled to kind of maintain that pace thereafter. So we slowly edged like some time back on him on days 3 and 4. Simon, the guy who'd won it the year beforehand, he had a bit of a trickier start to the first few days, and it was then I think on days 4 and days 5 where he found like a bit of his rhythm.
Right.
And he then so we'd kind of go back and forth between each other like in the days. It wasn't like we were ever really running with each other for a very long period of time within the
Okay.
days.
Yeah.
So you'd get in at the end of the day and see what the damage was, or
Yeah.
either the damage on you or the damage on them was. And it was on the fifth day. I'd had like a reasonably good day. That's like when you run through like the Brecon Beacons. It's 45 miles. It's I think over 10,000 feet of climbing. So it's a big day. I knew Simon had passed me within that day, but he lives like in the Brecon Beacons. He knows
Yeah.
it really well. So I think that was always going to happen. But anyway, I got in at the end of that day, saw the printout, and it said like you're the first male to come in. And I had no idea like how that
Right.
happened or what had happened. Anyway, it turned out that I think he'd got like quite severe shin splints or had done something to his leg, and he'd had to then pull out on that day.
Right.
So I went in to the final day, been at the front of the pack, and it was then a case of you've got 40 miles between the campsite and Cardiff,
Yeah.
and yeah, it was just a case of give it everything you've got for that last 40 odd miles and try hold things off. But I really didn't feel like, whilst I started that final day like at the front in the pole position, so to speak, it was only I didn't really let anything like kind of start taking over in my head
Yeah.
until maybe like 5 miles to go, because well, I knew like Chris Cope, the guy who'd run on the first and second day, he's like a really quick runner. There were still some other really good runners. I'm not a very good runner when it comes to running on the flat. I find it really, really hard. And the last day is just pretty flat, following a towpath
Right.
all the way to Cardiff.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
5 miles to go. I had, I think, a 45-minute buffer on the person who was in second on the final
Right.
day. So I knew they weren't going to be
At
able
that point,
to make
yeah.
up 45 minutes on me in the last 5 miles. And as soon as that happened, like, and I'd kind of done the maths in my
Relax.
head, like that, I was a bit of a wreck, really.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
yeah, like I was, yeah, emotionally a wreck.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
just because
Yeah.
I put like the best part of I don't know, over a year of training
Yeah.
and effort
Into
and kind of all the other stuff that goes with it. I was like, shit, like
it's
it's
actually
gonna
come
happen.
together.
Like I'm gonna win this event. Um, and yeah, I was the last 5 miles were not pretty or quick or
Yeah.
anything
Yeah.
like that. I was just
Yeah.
trying to kind of keep myself together. And as soon as I crossed the line, that was it. Like the floodgates opened,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it all dawned on me then.
How much of it though is in the winning as opposed to, if you hadn't have won, but you'd have performed, because the performance and the win, like the performance is based on you. The winning is based on like how good or ungood or injured or whatever other like, external factors that happen to other people. And I just think from a sporting perspective and being competitive about things. It's definitely been something that ultra running has, like, and I'm very rubbish at it, but just enjoy the. It's a personal journey in a way. It's probably a little bit different when, like, when you're at the back just trying to make it to the end, as opposed to like being like, oh, I'd love to be at the front trying to win as well, but it would be a different yeah, just think a different mindset. But like there's got to be an element of it that's your those emotions, the pride in a good way, like of what you've done and achieved is related to like just what you've done and what your body and your mind has got you through, as opposed to where you ranked on from someone else.
Yeah, I'd be lying though if I said like I was very content, like towards the probably like the fourth, fifth, sixth day. I was like content. I was like, you know what? I think I might get a podium position here. Like I was, and it wasn't. It's not all about the the podium necessarily from my point of view. It's more that like, am I kind of going away from this feeling that I've given it everything I possibly
Yeah,
can?
yeah,
Um, and so I'd gone into this thinking, and again, I know I'd said beforehand that I wasn't sure on how I'd be able to kind of compete against the other guys because I've never raced them before. But like
yeah,
I did feel like I'd done enough to put myself in kind of contention for maybe coming like quite doing all right in the sort
yeah,
of the standing, so to speak. But I just wanted to leave it feeling like I'd given it everything, and I'd done enough training. I thought to put myself, as I say, in that
yeah,
position. And so to get the outcome then too around uh, but the positioning and also just feeling like I felt really satisfied that I'd kind of got out of it what I wanted to get out, and I don't think I would have felt any different necessarily if I'd probably come in second or third. I
yeah.
think if I had have come, I don't know, mid pack, then I might have been slightly disheartened by it. But I don't know. It's really hard. It's hard to say.
I think it would like. I think the thing you were sort of articulated beautifully there is that it's like feeling like, well, I couldn't have like I've literally this has tested me and took me to everything I got, and like I'm happy with that. And that's where it is. It just the I guess the level that you're at was meant that your best was the best. And
Well,
that
like you
that
said, there's other circumstances too. Like Simon got injured, for example, and Chris
yeah,
did. Um, but there are other factors too that, like you say, you can't control any of that. Like so, I
yeah,
would have if I was beaten by someone else, then that's fine. Like I'd have been okay with it. I would have probably if we'd have got to the last day and I don't know, I knew that the person in second place was kind of gaining on me. I wouldn't have just kind of let off, so to
yeah,
speak.
yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah,
I would have given it absolutely everything to make sure I crossed that line first. But I
yeah,
think that's just kind of that's who I am. Like I will
yeah,
I will give everything in those certain situations, like 110%.
yeah.
And that happened in like the Northern Traverse that we did in April. That was just a real massive grunt for the last 40 miles of that race because I knew the guy who was in second there had gained time on me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I put myself into like a deep, deep, dark hole for the last 40 miles just to try get to the end of that one. Um, so yeah, it's yeah, just mind games.
Yeah, well, I want to ask you. I want to ask you about mind game tactics for some advice for uh, people. But before that, I do. You mentioned a bit like how you'd come in at the end of the day and you'd be sort of assessing yourself, but then you're also like you get a printout, but you're also like assessing like your competition effectively. For those of you that are front there, like what was the uh, what was the feeling between the few of you? Like, is it friendly? But is there any camaraderie? But or is it you know that you're against each other? Like, what's that? What's yeah? Give me a sense of the tone of that. I mean, because at the back we're like, hey, do you want to borrow some of my cake? It's just like I imagine it's a little bit different at the front.
No, I don't think so. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head earlier on with regards to like just what the community of ultra runners are like. I
Mm.
think no matter who I've ever bumped into, like in this sort of kind of world of running, like I do feel like most people have got a very similar mentality.
Yeah, nice.
Um,
I'm glad to hear
So
that. I've never spoken to someone at the front.
so no, I think it's exactly. I do think it's exactly the same. Like and when you get into camp, like we were all chatting to each other like
Yeah.
about the day and things. It was, but but coming back to the mind games, like I would, no matter how sore I was feeling, like I would try and walk as well as I possibly
Okay.
could
Yeah. Yeah.
between
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
tent
Okay.
and the camp
Nice.
just to try and like look like I've come out of the day feeling all right.
Oh, I
Um,
like it.
so, but in terms of like just the chatting to people and that sort of side of things, like that is very much there. But at the same time, there are a few little mind games being played, I think, as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just love the community around just running in general, really, and people who enjoy being out in the hills. Like it's
Yeah.
good group of people.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Mind games, though, then, rather than mind games against other people, because a lot of people listen to this, if they're going to take part in something that's going to stretch them and push them, the mind games are going to be with themselves.
Yeah,
Um, what are what are your sort of best tips for someone when you mentioned there like you had the last event that you did 40 miles going like 40 miles is to say that ending with 40 miles is like you know some people will never run 40 miles in their whole life like you've obviously know how to work against your own sort of demons or whatever's going on in the head like give us a bit of an idea of what that's like and potentially things that you find helpful to get yourself through when things are painful, when you don't feel like you can go any further, when you don't feel like you can walk another step or you're doubting yourself or just when things are hurting and you're like is that an injury or should I like is this if you ever have a bit where you're like am I doing myself some damage here like is this should I actually start like those
yeah,
types
yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
conversations that are going on in your head.
Yeah, they are absolutely going on in your head, and I think they obviously come more and more to the fore, like further through the event that you get,
Yeah.
um, because usually at the beginning, like everyone's like very high spirited, like probably chatting to each other, like that bit's good. Then maybe depending on like how long the event is, but then you've probably got that like middle section where you've kind of probably like you've trained for that. You probably whilst it is hard, you're probably
Yeah.
still reasonably within a bit of a comfort zone, but then you kind of get to that last bit where you really are either sleep deprived or your body's just absolutely shattered. Um, and also mentally, you can be, really tired too. So I don't know if I have anything, I don't think it's anything groundbreaking, but I chunk things up like so much. So,
Okay.
for example, the event that I was talking about beforehand, the Northern Traverse, that last 40 miles, like if I'd have thought I'm going to have like a foot race here for the last 40 miles of this and just think about it in its entirety. Like that
Yeah.
would have I'd have really struggled with that. So I just broke it down into like 10 miles. Like that's like I'm really used to running 10 miles. Like
Okay.
it's a relatively easy kind of distance for me to kind of cover off. So I chunk it up into 10 miles or I chunk it up into 2 miles or whatever it be. And then I just keep ticking through it. That for me is like the nice bit about having a watch is that you can see that you're always making progress.
Yeah.
Um, Even if it's steady progress, you know that in 10 minutes time you're 10 minutes further along than you were 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Um, but at the but I again like one of the other things on things like the Dragon's Back and in the Northern Traverse was the thing that helped was the pressure of having people behind me and like pushing as hard as I could to try and keep the gap as far as I could from those people. Um, and I appreciate not everybody's like maybe going for a position in these kind of races, so that might not work for everyone. But
Yeah.
even chatting to people who are again, middle of the pack or wherever they are in the race, usually they've got people around them who they might have as like say a person that they're either trying to stick with pace wise
Yeah.
or maybe someone that they're maybe trying to beat within the race. Just having those kind of little things to aim for. I appreciate that's nothing profound or anything kind of insightful, but
No, but it is
try to shout
because
out as much as I can.
it is because the chunking is it like you say when we're sat here comfy in a house, not out of breath, not dying from exhaustion. Um, it doesn't sound difficult to go, oh, just chunk it down, just break it down into smaller steps, you know. But that's what's hard to do when you're absolutely in that pain cave. Um, I had to, for our last day, I had to chunk it down to like my sister going, well, can you try and get in the car? And I was like crying, like, okay, I'll try and get in the car. And then it was like, okay, can you try and get to the start line, like get out of the car and get into like for the race briefing? And it was like, chunks,
Yeah,
and it
yeah,
was
yeah, yeah,
that was a massive lesson for me in going like
yeah,
like you say, chunking it down, but being able to chunk it down when you're not in a place to think clearly. And also, I think the thing that I underestimated, I've talked about quite a bit before, underestimated, but also the chunking it down. There's always, if you've chunked it down and then you still don't feel like you can do that first step, there's always a step before that.
yeah,
Because I
yeah,
was thinking like, oh, I can't run to that. Like I was like, I can't do it. And I was thinking a bit about the whole thing of the final day, and then it was like I just couldn't even think about getting to the start. And what my sister did great for me was like chunked it down one more, like just try and
yeah,
get in
yeah,
the car, and it's like it's there, like the car's
yeah,
there, and it's
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
okay, you've given me something that I can do.
yeah, yeah,
I was lucky there was someone around. I wasn't. Like, I couldn't have done that for myself at that time. My mentality was not in a place to be able to do that. Um, and the simplest advice is always the best. I think the difficulty with doing that chunking is when you're in a hole and not thinking clearly.
yeah, yeah,
Ultimately everything in your body wants you to stop.
yeah,
There's
yeah.
nothing wants you to keep going. Yeah.
But
What's
I
well,
don't know, we're fortunate though in these kind of races that a lot of them are in like really like they're in nice parts of the world,
yeah,
so you can just stop or slow down, have a look around, like have some food, like
yeah,
just do something else, like do anything to take your mind off what's happening in your feet, in your legs, like wherever it is in your body. Just because I think once you can distract your mind from the pain, you can carry on going probably an awful lot further than you think.
yeah.
So yeah, I'd be doing little things like that just to try and take my mind off what's happening in my legs, because they were like day 5 came and like all of a sudden I got this like stabbing pain in my quad. I was what's going on? But
Yeah.
luckily, like we were running through or about to run into a town at the time, and I went into the pharmacy and I just got this like a big 5 meter roll of Kate, and I literally just strapped it all around my leg, um, pretty tight. Got and but that kind of got me to the end, and
Right.
I would think about like what's happening in my leg. And I was like, well, if something bad happens, something bad happens. But I was like, I think I've done all I can to get this leg at least to be able to get to the end of that day.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just but I'd also try not think too much about what's happening in my leg, and if the worst happened, the worst happened. But luckily, like it got to the end.
I'll give you I've got two final sort of questions. I'll give you a slight heads up on the final question in that I'm going to ask you what your why is. Don't have to necessarily answer it now, but like, what's your why? Like, why you started? It might be different to what your why is now, but what's the why? Um, but I can't not have you on here. Between Breast Podcasts, we talk a lot about like the importance of breathing and like how we breathe. Um, where How much of it are you mouth breathing compared to nasal breathing? Are you aware of like your diaphragmatic breathing? Have you come across is breathing understanding how your breathing helps regulate your heart rate and your nervous system? And where are you with that in terms of your training? Or
I'll be honest, like I wouldn't know what diaphragmatic breathing is.
yeah, that's not abnormal. Don't worry.
But what I would say, like I think I'm like fairly in tune with like my
Yes.
body and how my body's feeling. And so what I probably would do is like I try and like slow down at times, take a breath. It's when I'm running, and I don't know, it'd be good to kind of get your take on this, but I was out on a run today and you was chatting to you. I was like, let me just see if we can try and like breathe. And it probably takes a lot of practice too.
Yeah.
But I was like, I'm gonna try and like breathe through my nose. And I've done this like in other runs, but it always feels like blocked whenever I'm running.
Yeah.
And I never take even when I'm well, however I'm breathing. I don't usually take like big breaths in. I just take. I try to keep things as controlled as possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, to try and like
Just
regulate
stay
my heart rate.
regulated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and just to
Yeah.
keep my heart rate as like low and as steady as I possibly can do. Like I do a lot of work to try and keep that down.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I today, like I say, I try to just breathe through my nose, and even if I have a cold, if I haven't got a cold,
Yeah.
I just don't. It feels like it's always blocked up, or it feels like it's runny, or whatever it be.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
never feels like I've got these nice clear airways going in through my nose.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that can, the ability of someone's like there's structurally some stuff going on with like our air rate for one, but two, there's like if we haven't used our nose for like exercise breathing, then it just needs a little bit of time to adapt to that. There's some like breath holding, nose clearing exercises that we do,
Yeah,
but it's also, as I asked about, like when I said about diaphragmatic breathing, I don't really like the mechanics of how we breathe with, and how our rib cage is supposed to articulate and how our diaphragm is supposed to move, all play into our ability to breathe well during exercise.
yeah,
And importantly, our CO2 tolerance. So how well you tolerate CO2, because that's our breathing stimulus, will affect your urge to breathe, your desire to breathe like faster or bigger.
yeah,
And
yeah,
when you have better control of that, it's going to let you have better control of your breath. But you're intuitively, you're not going to be performing at your level that you're at without having intuitively being aware of your breathing and how everyone knows it. Like when you start gasping for air,
yeah. It makes you slow
you've
down a
gone
bit.
past your
Yeah,
limit. So you automatically try to calm it down. There's just a little bit, the training, or I guess the coaching I do is like to just be quite focused in helping people like improve those mechanisms to
yeah,
give you better
yeah,
capacity
yeah.
for that. Yeah.
But I feel like I don't know. Again, when I try and I'll just be a bit more aware of like what's going on in my body. Like when I'm running, like again, I can feel it's at times like quite like tense in my shoulders, like I've
Yeah.
got them sort of like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
unstuck. But I think when you like start thinking actually like what's going on in my body and like is this kind of like comfortable running gait that I've got going on, I think you can just by taking maybe being a bit more conscious about what's going on, like you can kind of drop your shoulders, and it does. I think it changes like your running
Yeah.
and your
But
rhythm,
your
and
breathing is like your barometer of like
yeah,
how your system is handling the pace that you're running at.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I can
If you
know.
if you're comfortable, you know that your breathing will be comfortable. It's
Yeah,
a very, as well as looking at your Garmin watch of knowing like what your speed you're supposed to be running at, your breathing will tell you as well.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
No, 100%.
um, okay, so that final, I wanted to sort of give you a little bit of time to also muse that over, because I think it's a very interesting question as to, because these types of things that we take part in, you know, you don't have to go and run for 6 days and put yourself through that, but you choose to. Um, what's the why?
For me, it's trying to find where my like limits are. Um, I so I did the dragons, but going into that, it was a really difficult thing, but I wanted to sort of train as hard as I could to see whether or not I could kind of do it and hopefully like accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. And then like I've kind of signed up now to the spine and thinking about that, like that's a I don't know, for me it's something that yeah, it's just a massive, massive challenge. And I really get drawn in by these big challenges to find out whether or not I can kind of do them and can I do them well. So it's that really. It's a fairly simple one. It's just trying to find like where are the limits and how far can you push things.
Well, on that note, to just push within that a little bit, like, but have you considered, or even just considering now, like, what is the desire between trying to find out what your limits are? Like, why are you interested to see whether you can do the next thing? Like, what's the, like, I get what you're saying, like
Yeah,
that's, it's like that's the why, like up here, but what's the driver behind that?
that's a really good question. Probably one that I've never really thought too much on either.
Because
Um,
we stay at that one. We like, oh yeah, I like to push my limits, like to, and it's like that's the
yeah,
ease. The interesting one is the one that's below that. I don't know. I don't know whether it might be one of those that you send me a text in like a week's time going,
um,
I think it's this that do you know what I mean? It will be there will be it will be something because you can't be that driven to go and do these things if there isn't.
yeah, but I'm I'm like this though, in it's kind of part of like who I am, and I don't know. I do it as long as I'm passionate about the thing that I'm doing. I will. This is kind of like what I'm what I'm like.
Yeah,
Um, so, but I did it in, for example, I did it in my PhD. Like I don't know, and it might be someone saying, well, I suppose if I think back to it, actually, like when I was younger and playing football, like someone said to me that, and someone said to me then, it's like, oh, you'd be much better at this if you kind of got fitter at it. And I think those sort of like little
right.
things like stick
Yeah,
with you. Probably like from an academic standpoint, someone probably like I was never academically brilliant at school.
yeah,
It's like, well, there might be a little bit of like a I want to prove you wrong in
yeah,
me. And so then I kind of did that and did my PhD and did well in my PhD and like in my
yeah,
running, like I quite often think back to sort of that advice I was given when I was about 11 years old of someone saying you might be better if you got a bit fitter.
yeah,
Um, and I do think things like that from when you
yeah,
were young
for
probably
sure.
stick with you quite a lot.
Yeah.
Um,
So there
and
you say,
I do think back on that actually quite a bit when I'm out and about. Like yeah, I
yeah,
couldn't run a few miles
yeah,
10, 15 years ago, and now I'm able to go out and do quite a bit more than that.
yeah. So you're saying like pushing your limits up here, like beneath that was what I'm hearing is like proving proving to yourself or proving people wrong, like that type of thing. Because then
I
what?
mean, they don't even know. Like
Yeah.
it's not like I would ever go back to them with like a certificate for
No, no, I
Dragon
know. I
Chanting.
totally.
Uh,
Yeah.
but
No. But if you
I
go,
think
but as you go through that, you because then you can go. What's the like? What's the desire behind the?
yeah,
I
yeah,
want to prove either to other people or prove to myself, like
yeah,
that I can do these things. You
yeah,
don't know. It's not necessarily. It's maybe one for your journal if you. But you'll. I can see the way you can see that you're thinking about it, and like if you do have any thoughts on it, I'd be really interested to like drop us a
yeah.
message. I'm
No,
really interested
yeah.
to know. It's difficult because it's like,
Yeah.
but
Obviously, in my line of work, like I'm always asking people about like I do sort of like system science it's called, and it's all about trying to understand like the causes of causes. So I'm always
okay, yeah,
asking
yeah.
that
So there you go. This
question,
is it. This is it.
always
Yeah,
asking it. Just
yeah,
never thinking it about things like yeah, the things that I'm interested in and why I do what I do. So but I fundamentally enjoy it though as well.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Yeah,
I'm not
you've got
yeah,
to
yeah,
enjoy it, haven't you?
I'm not just doing it from the oh someone said you'd be better at football if you got
Yeah.
fitter. That's
So yeah, so you went and
I
did the
really
Dragons
do
back
enjoy it in
40 years
genuine ways.
later.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
well, awesome, James. Thank you so much for spending the time with us, sharing what it's like at the front of the pack. And I'm sure I've definitely learned some things from you, and I'm
Life,
sure people
likewise.
listening
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
be also either learned some really practical things as well as being inspired to take on a little bit of something that might challenge them or push them to them. It's whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a 6 day ultra marathon. And also hopefully like for people trying to think of I hadn't necessarily planned that last like question, but it was just came out as we were going through. And I encourage people if they're thinking about like what drives them to do things to just keep asking themselves that why and see
Yeah.
how far down you can go. Like I'm going to do it again for myself for sure because there's always more you start to find out about yourself as you do that.
Definitely. There'll be some in between, I'm sure, that 11-year-old me and the
Yeah,
32-year-old me that I haven't thought about. Yeah, no, it's a really good question.
yeah. Just let people know where can they find out more about what you're up to and other events that you're doing. It sounds like you've got a lot going on. Instagram
Um,
or a website or anything.
only a little bit. I don't put too much.
It's all secrets on it, all trading secrets. I turn up
Instagram
and I'll
will have a
smash
few
you.
bits and pieces, but yeah, just my name might pop onto an entry list somewhere. No, Instagram will be like from a running point of view. Instagram's a good place to kind of keep up to date with these things.
So what's your Instagram handle?
James Nobles 91
Yeah. There you go, guys and girls. James Nables 91.
for
Head
boring
over,
content.
head over, give him a follow. And yeah, no, thanks
Absolute
for
pleasure.
the time today, and
Absolute pleasure.
I look forward to hearing your why in a WhatsApp message later.
You might get a few pages of A4 coming back at you that you didn't want.
All right, cheers,
Cool.
pal.
Cheers.
Thanks so much. Take care. Okay, so there we have it. James Nobles on the Between Breasts podcast. Wow, I hope you are inspired. I hope you got some things to take out of that. And whether it's don't feel like if you're not an ultra runner, there's nothing in there for me. Look within that, and even just that inspiration. Try and challenge yourself. Try and see what your own limits are. And that question at the end of like, what's your why? And then you may answer that, and then be like, is there a layer deeper to that why? And then do a bit of digging. That's what that's gonna be my own homework. I'm gonna do some digging. I'm gonna take some inspiration from James, and I'm gonna take some practical. Be prepared, like a Boy Scout. I was in the Boy Scouts. His preparation and progressive approach to training, I think, was very, very clear. And yeah, the preparation of like volunteering as one of the marshals the year before the event to get a real gauge and understanding of what the event is, and my theory of doing half of the thing you're going to do, or something that is similar to half of the thing you're going to do. He did that, so I was definitely on something with that. So yeah, I'm not going to ask you to do a review of the podcast. I'm not going to ask you to share it or anything like that. I'm going to ask you to sit, maybe get your journal out, or just if you haven't got a journal, write down some piece of paper, or just sit and think and just ask yourself that question of what's your why towards anything in life, or even life itself, if you want to go real deep. Let's do some digging. And if you want to share what some of those whys come out as, I'd love to hear from you. So you can get in touch on Instagram. You can check out James's Instagram or mine, jacko.david.jackson. And thank you for listening. I hope to see you next time. I may be having, depending on when this one goes out, a little break over the summer for a summer holiday in the camper van, aka the podcast studio. So we should really probably be doing podcasts in there. But no, it's going to be holiday time, or holiday time has been, and this is the first one back after the holiday, and therefore, like, hey, there'll be another one next week. But we'll see how when this gets out. And thank you for your patience with that. So nothing else for us to say in this podcast except you've been listening, I've been breathing, and you've also been breathing, haven't you? Until next time, keep it nasal.